What is this little black brat doing near my precious painting? Get her filthy hands away from it right now." Mrs. Victoria Peaton's sharp voice cut through the elegant silence of the Whitmore Mansion gallery. Like broken glass, heads turned. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above the polished marble floor as gasps rippled through the crowd. The wealthy guests stood frozen, eyes darting toward the small figure at the center of the storm. 12-year-old Zara Williams. She didn't move. Her dark eyes stayed fixed on the painting in front of her, a $12 million French Impressionist masterpiece. Beside her, her mother, Marie Williams, dressed in a simple black maid's uniform, rushed forward in panic. "Please forgive us, Mrs. Peaton. Zara, move away this instant." But Zara didn't move an inch. The guests waited for the child to obey, for the embarrassment to fade, for the moment to end quietly. Instead, Zara's small voice rose, calm, clear, and in perfect aristocratic French. "That painting is fake." The words hit like thunder. The elegant room fell into shocked silence. Guests exchanged stunned glances. A maid's daughter, accusing a millionaire's painting of being a forgery? Impossible. From the far side of the room, a woman in a deep blue gown approached. Dr. Catherine Whitmore, the mansion's owner and a renowned art historian, had overheard everything. She'd heard whispers about the painting's authenticity before, but this was something else. "Excuse me, little one," Dr. Whitmore said softly in French, kneeling to Zara's eye level. "What exactly did you just say?" Zara's voice trembled, but her words were precise. "The brushwork in the lower right corner doesn't match Monet's technique from 1894. The paint layering shows synthetic binders that weren't invented until the 1950s." Gasps erupted again. People leaned in, whispering. A 12-year-old girl speaking fluent French, using technical art terms that even most art students couldn't pronounce. Mrs. Peaton's face turned crimson. "This is ridiculous. A servant's child cannot possibly know anything about French Impressionism." But Dr. Whitmore raised her hand for silence. "Continue," she said. In English this time. Zara nodded, switching languages effortlessly. "The signature is wrong too. Monet usually signed his water lily paintings in the bottom left corner. This one's on the right. And the canvas, it's machine prepared, not hand stretched like they did in 1894. Dr. Whitmore froze, her cup of coffee halfway to her lips. These weren't wild guesses. These were the same concerns she had secretly been worrying about for weeks. "Where did you learn all this?" she asked quietly. Zara looked down shyly. "I've been reading and watching for 12 years, ma'am. Every day when Mama works, I study the books in your library. I taught myself French and Italian to read the originals." Marie's voice shook with fear and embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Dr. Whitmore. She's always been curious, but I never thought she'd speak out of turn." Dr. Whitmore studied the girl's face for a long moment. The child's intelligence was undeniable. Finally, she said, "Zara, I think you and I need to have a serious conversation." 2 hours later, the mansion's private library glowed under warm lamplight. Shelves towered toward the ceiling, filled with hundreds of books in French, Italian, and German. Dr. Whitmore gestured to a pile of art history volumes. "Show me what you know." Zara hesitated, then walked over to a thick book, flipping it open with confident fingers. "This one," she said in perfect Italian, "was painted by Caravaggio during his exile in Naples. You can tell from the darker colors and the desperate energy in his brushstrokes." Dr. Whitmore blinked. "And this one?" she asked, pointing to another page. Zara glanced at it and replied in flawless Spanish. "Picasso's Blue Period, 1903. He painted it after his friend Carlos Casagemas took his own life. You can feel the sadness in the posture of the subject." For the next half hour, Dr. Whitmore tested her relentlessly, switching paintings, languages, and eras. Each answer was correct. Each explanation came with depth, confidence, and quiet emotion. Finally, Zara pointed to a label beneath a Degas ballet print. "This catalog date is wrong," she said softly. "The costume style and theater architecture place it in 1877, not 1874. Dr. Whitmore's eyes widened. She checked her files. Zara was right again. "How long have you been studying my collection?" she asked. "Since I could read," Zara replied. Mama started working here when I was a baby. While she cleaned, I'd sit in this room. The books became my teachers." She smiled faintly. "I used free phone apps to learn languages, French first, then Italian, Spanish, and German. I wanted to understand the art the way the artists wrote about it." Dr. Whitmore could hardly breathe. This child, this invisible girl in a maid's uniform, had quietly educated herself to the level of a university scholar. "I've noticed several authentication issues in your collection," Zara said hesitantly. "But who would listen to someone like me?" Those words hit like a dagger. Dr. Whitmore set down her cup and looked at the young girl. Really looked at her. She realized that for 12 years, this brilliant mind had been ignored simply because of her mother's job and the color of her skin. "Tell me everything," Dr. Whitmore said. Zara took a deep breath and began describing flaws she'd seen in other recent acquisitions. Paint mixtures that didn't match the era, signature inconsistencies, and historical inaccuracies. Her explanations were sharp and professional, the kind that could come only from true passion and years of quiet study. When she finished, Dr. Whitmore sat back, speechless. "Zara," she whispered, "you may have just saved us from a massive scandal." Zara lowered her eyes. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble. I just love learning about art." Dr. Whitmore smiled faintly. "Trouble? My dear, you might have just saved my entire career." Outside, the moonlight shimmered over the mansion gardens. Inside, something extraordinary had happened. An invisible child had been seen for the first time. Dr. Whitmore turned to her. "Zara, are you absolutely sure about the Monet painting?" "Yes," Zara said confidently. "I've studied it for 3 months. The evidence is overwhelming." "Then we'll bring in experts first thing tomorrow," Dr. Whitmore said, reaching for her phone. "If you're right, and I believe you are, this could expose something much bigger than a single fake painting." As the clock ticked past midnight, the mansion that once silenced a little girl's voice now held the echo of something far more powerful: truth, brilliance, and the beginning of a revolution. The next morning, the Whitmore Mansion's conservation lab buzzed with quiet tension. The French painting sat under bright forensic lights, its colors cold and flat under scrutiny. Dr. Whitmore stood beside Zara, who wore a clean blouse and a look of nervous determination. "I want you to examine this like a scientist," Dr. Whitmore said gently, handing the girl a magnifying glass and a notepad. "Take your time. Document everything you see." Zara nodded. Her small hands moved with practiced steadiness as she adjusted the light angles. Her face calm but focused. Under the glare, the painting's surface revealed 100 tiny secrets invisible to the naked eye. "The brush strokes on the petals are hesitant," Zara murmured. "Monet's work always flows freely. He never hesitated." She pointed carefully at the lower corner. "And look, titanium white. That pigment didn't exist until 1916, but this painting is supposed to be from 1894. Dr. Whitmore leaned in. "Are you sure?" "Positive," Zara replied. "And here, the canvas texture, see how it's too uniform? Machine prepared." Real 1890s canvases had uneven fibers. Artists' hands stretched them. For 2 hours, she worked in total silence, making detailed notes, sketching brush patterns, and taking photos with her old cracked phone. Every so often, she'd whisper a quiet HMM and jot something down with the focus of a trained professional. Finally, she set her pen down. "It's a forgery," she said softly. "A really good one, but fake." Dr. Whitmore stared at her, caught between disbelief and awe. What if these modern materials were added during restoration? She asked carefully. Zara shook her head. "Restoration materials sit on top of the paint. These are mixed into the paint layers themselves. Whoever made this knew exactly what they were doing. They used old brushes, aged varnish, even cracks made to look natural. But the science doesn't lie." Dr. Whitmore felt a chill. "Zara, if you're right, this painting could destroy reputations. It's insured for $12 million. Zara looked down at her shoes. "Maybe I should stop. I don't want to cause you trouble." "No," Dr. Whitmore said firmly, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. "You're not causing trouble. You're uncovering truth." She hesitated, then picked up her phone. "I'm calling in the Metropolitan Museum's authentication team. They'll be here tomorrow. And if your findings are correct," She smiled softly. You'll have just done something remarkable. Zara's eyes widened. What if they don't believe me? I'm just a kid. Then they'll be making the same mistake everyone else has made, Dr. Whitmore said. But this time, we'll have proof. The next morning, the mansion filled with the hum of equipment and the low murmur of professionals setting up. Dr. Rebecca Carter, the head of authentication, arrived with a team of 4 experts and several cases of tools. X-ray scanners, spectrometers, microscopes. It looked more like a science lab than an art room. So where's this supposed expert who identified the issue? Dr. Carter asked, her tone skeptical as she scanned the room. Dr. Whitmore gestured toward Zara, who stood quietly in the corner, hands clasped. This is Zara Williams, she said proudly. She made the initial assessment. Dr. Carter blinked. She? Her eyebrows shot up. You're telling me this child is your expert witness? Zara said nothing. What credentials does she have? Another member, Dr. Martinez, asked sharply. What school? What degree? You can't be serious. Whispers spread across the team. Probably overheard someone talking. One muttered. Children don't understand authentication. Zara felt that familiar sting, the one she'd lived with her entire life. The weight of being unseen, unheard, underestimated. She closed her eyes and remembered her mother's words. Show them your mind, baby. Drive. Whitmore faced a hard choice. She could protect her reputation by stepping back or stand beside the child everyone doubted. She chose the latter. Dr. Carter, she said firmly, I've reviewed Zara's findings myself. Her analysis is precise, professional, and correct. I suggest we give her a chance. Dr. Carter crossed her arms. Without formal training, this is highly irregular. Zara took a step forward. Her voice was calm, steady. May I explain my observations? Dr. Carter frowned but nodded curtly. Zara began speaking, first in Italian, then in French, then in German, describing the technical inconsistencies in the painting, the signature placement, the historical inaccuracies. Her pronunciation was flawless. Her vocabulary was advanced. Every word came out with quiet authority. The room went silent. Dr. Martinez stared at her. Where did you learn to speak like that? I taught myself, Zara said simply. Knowledge doesn't need permission. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Dr. Park, the youngest team member, said carefully, maybe we should hear her full analysis before we begin ours. Dr. Carter looked annoyed but relented. Fine, but when our tests prove her wrong, I expect an apology for wasting our time. Zara nodded calmly. The evidence will speak for itself. The investigation began. X-ray scans flickered on screens, showing layers beneath the painting's surface. Zara guided them quietly, pointing out areas worth testing. Try the lower right corner, she suggested. You'll find uneven layering there. Dr. Carter adjusted the scanner, and when the image appeared, her eyes widened. The paint density was completely inconsistent, exactly as Zara had predicted. Incredible, Dr. Park whispered. As the hours passed, Zara moved between workstations, translating old French documents, explaining terms in Italian, even reading handwritten notes from European archives that no one else could decipher. At one point, Dr. Martinez called her over. What do you make of this mark here? Zara looked into the microscope. It's not French, she said. It's Flemish. The forger used the wrong language style for that period. Dr. Martinez blinked in surprise. You're right. I would have missed that. One by one, every test confirmed what Zara had said from the start. The paint contained synthetic binders from the 1950s. The canvas was machine-made. The varnish was artificially aged. It was a fake, a masterful one, but fake nonetheless. Dr. Carter finally set her clipboard down. Humbled. In 20 years, I've rarely seen such a thorough preliminary report, she admitted quietly. The entire team's attitude shifted. They began asking Zara's opinion before each step, treating her not as a child, but as a colleague. Look at this, Dr. Park said, holding up new data. If this is forged, how many others might be? Zara looked thoughtful. I've seen similar patterns in auction photos online. Same hesitation strokes, same texture. It could be a network, not just one forger. That sentence changed everything. The experts gathered around her as she pulled up images on her old phone. The style appears in paintings sold in London, Paris, and New York, different artists. Same signature patterns. Someone's mass-producing fakes. Dr. Whitmore felt a chill. You might have just uncovered an international operation. By evening, every test had confirmed Zara's analysis. The Monet painting hanging in the Whitmore Gallery was a forgery, a masterpiece of deception uncovered by a child no one believed. Dr. Carter sighed, finally meeting Zara's eyes. You've done something extraordinary, Miss Williams. You just taught us all a lesson about humility. Zara smiled shyly. I just wanted the truth to be seen. Dr. Whitmore watched the girl pack up her notebook, pride and disbelief mingling in her chest. She had started this day as an invisible child in a maid's uniform. She ended it as the girl who outsmarted the experts. And this was only the beginning. The following week, the mansion's conference room was filled with tension thick enough to touch. Dr. Whitmore stood before the museum's board of directors, a group of 12 distinguished men and women seated around a gleaming mahogany table. At the end of the room, Zara sat quietly beside her mother, her small hands folded in her lap. So let me get this straight, said Chairman Harrison, adjusting his gold-rimmed glasses. You're telling us a 12-year-old maid's daughter exposed a $12 million forgery? The room murmured with disbelief. She has no degree, no formal education, said Mrs. Foster, the chair of the Education Committee. How can we possibly trust a child's judgment on something this important? Dr. Whitmore didn't flinch. Because she's right. Every single one of her observations was confirmed by professional analysis. The painting was fake, a sophisticated forgery that slipped past every expert except her. Mr. Richardson, a wealthy donor, frowned. This could ruin our reputation. If the media finds out a little girl discovered something our entire staff missed, we'll be a laughing stock. Or, Dr. Whitmore said sharply, we'll be remembered as the museum that finally learned to recognize brilliance in unexpected places. She spread Zara's detailed notes across the table, hand-drawn sketches, pigment analysis charts, and X-ray findings labeled in multiple languages. This work rivals that of graduate-level researchers. Talent doesn't need a diploma to exist. Mrs. Foster shook her head. She's just a maid's daughter. There are standards for a reason. Dr. Whitmore's patience finally cracked. Society's standards nearly cost us $12 million, she said, her voice cold but calm. While we were busy checking resumes, this child was preventing an institutional disaster. The boardroom fell silent. Then what exactly are you proposing? Chairman Harrison asked. Dr. Whitmore took a deep breath. A full scholarship for Zara, complete educational sponsorship, private tutoring, mentorship with our curators, and formal recognition as a consulting specialist. Mrs. Foster's voice trembled with disbelief. She's 12. So was Mozart when he composed symphonies. Dr. Whitmore replied firmly. So was Picasso when he painted masterpieces. Extraordinary talent doesn't wait for adulthood. The board members exchanged uncertain looks. The vote was close, 7 in favor, 5 against, but it passed. When Dr. Whitmore turned to Zara with the news, the girl's eyes filled with tears. But can I still help Mama with her work? She asked softly. I don't ever want to forget where I came from. Dr. Whitmore smiled warmly. You can do both, my dear. In fact, that's what makes your story so powerful. That afternoon, in the same library where Zara's journey had begun, Dr. Whitmore placed a small brass key into her hand. This opens every door in the library, she said. You no longer have to study in secret. You have full access now to knowledge, opportunity, and recognition. Zara stared at the key, tears slipping down her cheeks. It wasn't just metal and weight. It was everything she had ever dreamed of. Thank you for seeing me, she whispered. Dr. Whitmore's eyes softened. Thank you for making me see myself. That evening, Zara rushed into their small servants' quarters, clutching the key tightly. Mama, she cried breathlessly. Marie looked up from folding laundry, her face tired but loving. What's wrong, baby? Zara dropped into a chair, trembling with excitement. Dr. Whitmore is going to pay for my education. She gave me a key to the library. She called me a consulting specialist. Marie froze, the towel falling from her hands. What are you saying? Zara told her everything. The meeting, the scholarship, the board's decision. As she spoke, Marie's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and touched the small brass key in her daughter's palm. "All these years," she whispered, "I prayed someone would notice you. I prayed that one day the world would see what I already knew." Zara squeezed her mother's hand. "You made this happen, Mama. Every break you gave up so I could read. Every time you saved money for a book. Every night you told me to keep learning. It's because of you." Marie smiled through her tears. "Baby, I may have opened the door, but you walked through it with courage." That night, they sat together in the tiny kitchen, the key resting between them on the worn wooden table. Through the window, children played in the courtyard, laughter echoing against the city noise. "This isn't just about us," Marie said softly. "It's about every child like you, every person who's ever been overlooked. You're proving that brilliance doesn't depend on where you're born." Zara nodded quietly, understanding the responsibility her story carried. "I want to show other kids that knowledge is the only real power that matters." 3 weeks later, the story exploded beyond anything the Whitmore family had expected. The FBI had traced the fake painting to a massive international forgery ring. Agent Sarah Thompson arrived at the mansion carrying files thicker than old encyclopedias. "We've identified over 40 suspicious paintings sold across Europe and America," she said gravely. "Estimated losses, over $100 million. This is the largest art fraud network in modern history." Everyone stared in stunned silence. "Your young consultant," Agent Thompson continued, glancing at Zara, "has been instrumental. Her ability to recognize forgery patterns could help us dismantle this entire operation." That's when the door opened and Antoine Dubois, a famous French art dealer, walked in with his expensive lawyers. His tailored suit and smug expression oozed arrogance. "This is absurd," he declared in a heavy accent. "I have sold to the most prestigious institutions in the world. My reputation is flawless." His gaze fell on Zara, who stood beside Dr. Whitmore. He sneered. "And who is this child? Surely she isn't part of this professional discussion." Dr. Whitmore's tone was calm but firm. "Mr. Dubois, this is Zara Williams, the specialist who uncovered the forgery." Dubois laughed, a loud, ugly sound that bounced off the marble walls. "A little girl? You insult my intelligence." He turned to his lawyers. "This meeting is a waste of time." Agent Thompson began questioning him, but Dubois answered with arrogance, smirking between sentences. When he switched to French, his tone grew cruel. He thought no one else in the room could understand. "These foolish Americans know nothing about art," he said in rapid French, his voice dripping with disdain. "And that little black girl, she cannot even speak proper French." Zara's fists clenched under the table, but she stayed silent, her face calm. Dubois kept talking, unaware that every word was being recorded and understood. He bragged about his European partners, his operations in Milan and Rome, even his artificial aging techniques. He gave away names, addresses, and details he thought were secret. Dr. Whitmore and Agent Thompson exchanged a silent glance but said nothing. They let him speak and bury himself. When he finally paused, Zara stood up slowly. Her voice was steady, her accent perfect. "Monsieur Dubois," she said in flawless French, "I understood every word you just said." The room fell silent. Dubois's smug grin vanished. His skin turned pale as marble. Zara continued, switching smoothly to Italian. "And I heard what you said about your partners in Milan and Rome, about the forgers, and their methods." Dubois sank into his chair, stunned. "That's impossible," he stammered. You're just a servant's child." Zara looked him straight in the eye. "I'm many things you never cared to notice," she said quietly, "including someone who speaks 7 languages and pays attention when others don't." The entire room watched in silence as Agent Thompson hit the stop button on the recorder. The confession was complete. Dubois's arrogance had built an empire of lies, and a 12-year-old girl had just brought it crashing down. The next morning, news vans lined the streets outside the Whitmore mansion like a small army. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. The world had learned about the incredible 12-year-old who had exposed an international art crime network. Inside the mansion, the Grand Gallery had been transformed into a press room. Zara stood beside Dr. Whitmore, wearing a neat navy blazer with her new consultant badge clipped proudly to her chest. The same space where she had once been humiliated now overflowed with flashing lights and global attention. Dr. Whitmore stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen of the international press," she began, her voice firm and proud. "Allow me to introduce the person who uncovered the largest art fraud operation in modern history, Miss Zara Williams, age 12. The room erupted in applause. Dozens of microphones pointed toward Zara as journalists leaned forward eagerly. A reporter from the BBC asked first, "Zara, how did you learn to speak so many languages at such a young age?" Zara smiled modestly. "I taught myself. I used library books and free phone apps because I wanted to read art history in its original languages. Sometimes translations leave out important details." Another journalist from CNN leaned closer. "What made you suspicious about the Monet painting?" "I'd been watching it during my mother's cleaning shifts," she said softly. "The brushwork and paint didn't match Monet's authentic techniques from that period. The more I looked, the more I realized something was wrong." Her calm, intelligent answers impressed everyone. She switched effortlessly between English, French, Italian, and Spanish as reporters from different countries spoke up. Her poise was natural, her words honest. Within hours, videos of her interview were spreading across social media with millions of views. The hashtag talent has no uniform trended worldwide. Messages poured in from people who saw themselves in her story: janitors, drivers, waitresses, young students, and elders, all saying the same thing: "We've been overlooked too." And then, amid the crowd, Mrs. Victoria Peaton appeared. The same woman who had once shouted at Zara now stood trembling before the cameras. "I want to make a public apology," she said, her voice shaking. "I was completely wrong in how I treated Zara Williams. I judged her unfairly because of her age and background. She has shown more wisdom and grace than I ever have." All cameras turned to Zara. Her response was calm and mature. "I appreciate your apology, Mrs. Peaton," she said gently. "But instead of apologizing to me, I'd prefer if you support education programs for children who can't afford private schools. That would mean more." The crowd broke into applause. Even the reporters smiled. In that moment, Zara didn't just show intelligence, she showed heart. Dr. Whitmore stepped forward next, her voice filled with pride. "The Whitmore Foundation will create new opportunities for people like Zara. From today, our institutions will value skill and knowledge over credentials. We will fund scholarships for hidden talents, the ones society ignores." The audience cheered. Cameras flashed. The art world was changing right before their eyes. Then Dr. Whitmore turned toward Zara, holding out a small, leather-bound art history book. "This," she said, "is a first edition of the book that once inspired you. It's now inscribed to a true expert and my dear friend." Zara's eyes filled with tears as she accepted it. "Thank you," she whispered. The moment was broadcast live in over 50 countries. Art institutions, from London to Paris to Tokyo, began publicly reevaluating their hiring practices. Interpol requested Zara's help for ongoing forgery cases. Universities offered her honorary scholarships and mentorships. But Zara's response once again stunned the world. "I'm grateful," she said during an interview, "but I want to stay here. I want to keep learning and working where this journey began. I want to prove that extraordinary talent can exist anywhere, even in the places people never look." Her humility made the story even more powerful. That day, as cameras turned toward the audience, they caught sight of Marie Williams sitting proudly in the front row, tears streaming down her face. Zara smiled and pointed toward her. "This is my mother," she said. "She made everything possible through her sacrifices and her faith in education." The entire room rose in applause. Reporters, curators, and investigators, all clapping for the woman who had quietly given everything so her daughter could learn. Zara's story spread across continents, translated into multiple languages, studied in universities, and shared by millions online. She had become a symbol of what happens when the world finally listens to voices it once ignored. 6 months later, Zara walked through the same gallery where it had all begun. The chandeliers sparkled, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh paint. But everything was different now. She was leading a tour in 3 languages at once, explaining brushstrokes to visitors from Paris, describing color palettes to students from New York. The once quiet Maid's daughter was now the youngest art consultant in the world. The museum's reputation had soared. Visitors came not just to see masterpieces, but to see her, the girl who saw what experts missed. Zara had also started something new. Every Saturday, she taught free language and art lessons to children from working families. They gathered in the library she once studied in alone. Knowledge, she told them, isn't about privilege. It's about curiosity and patience. Her mother watched proudly from the corner, sometimes joining in to serve tea and sandwiches to the eager young learners. The Whitmore Foundation's new policies inspired a global shift. 12 major museums hired staff based on skill rather than degrees. Companies began rethinking how they recognized hidden potential. Schools launched programs for gifted kids from poor neighborhoods. And all of it had started with a single girl who refused to stay silent in front of a fake painting. At night, Zara sat by her window, surrounded by books in 7 languages. Her museum badge rested beside a framed photograph of her mother. Through the glass, she could see city lights glowing like stars, and she wondered how many hidden geniuses were still waiting to be seen. She received messages every day from teachers, janitors, students, and even retirees, telling her how her story inspired them. One message came from a boy in Detroit whose math skills were finally recognized. Another from a grandmother in Kentucky whose quilting designs were displayed in a local art show. Zara smiled. The movement she started was spreading across the world, one story at a time. One evening, she recorded a message for her followers online. Her face was calm, her voice clear. "Tomorrow," she said, "I want you to notice the people around you who others might overlook. The janitor who writes poetry, the barista studying history, the quiet co-worker with ideas no one hears. Ask yourself, what brilliance are we missing because we're not paying attention?" She paused, then smiled. "Share this story if you believe talent can come from anywhere. Let's build a world that looks beyond titles and uniforms, a world that truly listens." The video spread like wildfire. People across continents began sharing their own stories of discovery and hope. New mentorship programs formed. Scholarships grew. And for the first time, society began to truly look and see. That night, as the gallery lights dimmed and the city settled into quiet, Zara sat at her desk, writing the first chapter of her upcoming book about modern art authentication. She placed the brass library key beside her notebook, a symbol of how far she and her mother had come. She looked toward the painting that had once caused all the chaos. It now hung under a new plaque, engraved with words that shimmered under the soft light, to Zara Williams, who reminded the world that brilliance doesn't need permission. It only needs recognition. Zara smiled softly, whispering to herself, "We did it, Mama. We really did." And somewhere, deep in the silence of the gallery, it felt as if every masterpiece was smiling back.